Tony from HousingWorks, and I have a question. I guess it would be for HPD and the councilman. The plan speaks a lot, obviously, of density and rezoning neighborhoods, and we've seen the devastating, in some cases, effects the rezoning of neighborhoods have had in terms of driving out low-income tenants. With the current rent regulations, there's actually an incentive for developers to identify buildings that may be at the vacancy decontrol cap, get those tenants out, and then knock those buildings down and build bigger. So I'm curious to know if the city has any plans to make sure that the private developers they're partnering with are not those same developers that took advantage of the prior administration's non-inclusionary zoning density issues, drove out low-income tenants, and sort of really wreaked havoc on working-class neighborhoods all over the city. Because just partnering with private developers doesn't seem to be the answer, and it seems to be a major crux of this plan.
So, Andrew, those are excellent points. Let me really answer in two different ways. So the first is that one of the principles of our preservation policies is that we're going to try to be more strategic much earlier in the process. So if we're working with our partners at city planning, EDC, et cetera, to invest in a neighborhood, we're going to understand that investment may very well drive up prices, right? Drive up prices in a variety of ways. And so one of the things that we're looking to try to experiment with is, before we make any of those investments, going in and trying to lock in some affordability in a variety of creative ways, right? Trying to reach regulatory agreements with property owners, trying to get a lot of that housing preserved right then before we start to invest in the neighborhood and start to see the neighborhood change. So that's one thing. Now, that's an untested area. We're going to be trying all kinds of different things, and I really appreciate any ideas that people have about how we can do that best and what we should be looking at there, because we're really on uncharted grounds there. But I think that there are things that we can do, and we're going to be experimenting across the board. The point that you raised is, well, are we going to be making sure that the people that we're doing business with, the developers, for example, the property owners, are not bad actors in other categories? And yes, we are. One of the things that we're looking at now is using our data about housing violation, about code violations, about harassment, all of those kinds of things, to say to a property owner, you've been a bad actor and we are not doing business with you. The city is not doing business with you. We're telling the procurement officers, we're talking across agencies, so that if you've acted badly in one area, we're not rewarding you in other areas. Again, that's untested waters, right? We're pushing some envelopes there, and we're going to be experimenting with a variety of ways in which to do that. Obviously, that's got some serious legal constraints to it, and we're going to be working to see exactly how far we can push in that direction. But we certainly agree with the basic premise of your question, which is we only should be doing business with people who are protecting our neighborhoods, enhancing our neighborhoods, and not working against them.
So obviously the effects of predatory purchases, predatory equity, predatory lending, and people doing craziness in the market, combined with gentrification, it's undeniably wreaked havoc on certain communities, and that's undeniable. So even while I believe, one, we have to make sure we're building mixed, so that there's not pockets of poverty, which I don't think help anyone. We want to make sure indigenous people also can stay in the place that they've built a home and generally made the area the reason why people want to move there. So that is important that I think we do that. And as a housing chair, we're going to be putting money into this plan, and I would do whatever we legally can to make sure that we're not working with actors who have helped this crisis move along, particularly in the private sector. So I'm glad that the commissioner has sided with that as well. Even more important, I think the nature of how this is going to work is, one, I always say, people, we have to change how we think of what our bottom line is. So I want people to make money. They can't make all the money. So the bottom line should be making money to make sure that's what you're in business for, but also knowing that, you know, the bottom line is actually providing affordable units there. And I want to make sure that we push as far as we can to the most affordable units when we're building, and hopefully we'll be working with actors who have that in mind as well. But also know that there are bad actors on the nonprofit side as well, so we want to make sure that we're working with partners in the for-profit and nonprofit sector that have good reputations and records on these things.
I'd like to add one comment that kind of bridges those comments, and I think it's an important one that comes from experience too. When we talk about preservation, we often talk about buildings or developments that either fail out of some type of a program or that opt out of a program. They're usually you look at the opt-out risk, and sometimes we say we should make investments where there's that opt-out risk. We also look at buildings that are failing out for one reason or need help for a number of reasons. This is kind of a middle ground in terms of the policy, because you're really not talking about either of those things naturally occurring. What you're talking about is exactly what was described, situations in where some sort of opportunistic situation has arisen and those buildings are driven out and are repurposed with some gaining idea at hand. So the policy that we just described, and people refer to it as different things. It could be, I sometimes refer to it as a community compact, where you try and look at some of this naturally occurring affordability. You make a repair loan to a building, you do work, but you also get under a regulatory agreement that protects the tenants. It's attractive at that level, and I think it's important that we're doing it. It runs a little bit of the risk of the fact that it's hard to describe what you're buying at any given moment, because you're really not buying a lot of capitalized affordability in the strict sense. You're not buying something that is lower rent in a high rent district, but what you are buying is exactly what we described, which is community preservation, tenant protection, balanced community, a protection against gentrification and all those sorts of things.
Insurance.
Insurance. And we spent a lot of time thinking about those things, so I'd just like to add that comment to that.
So other questions? Yes. Yes.
I certainly appreciate the neighborhood by neighborhood approach, and recognizing the tremendous diversity of New York City neighborhoods. Mr. Enderlin, can you highlight more specifically the dimensions on which you will be assessing this neighborhood, that neighborhood, neighborhood by neighborhood? On what dimensions will you be assessing their needs?
It's probably premature to go into a lot of the exact metrics, and we are working to look, with a lot of modeling, and we're probably going to be working with some professional consultants on some of that modeling as well. But there are a number of ways to present it. You can look at, a lot of times you look at what affordability are you providing from a baseline. The other way to look at it is, if you take, for example, inclusionary in a given neighborhood, you might look at what affordability are you looking at as discounted from the market rents that exist there. What kind of blended, Rich talked a little bit about this idea of mixing incomes and blending incomes as a policy goal that makes a lot of sense in different places. And then you're talking about trying to toggle across those scales and figure out neighborhood by neighborhood, what's it going to cost to build, what are the rents that are going on there, what's the direction of that neighborhood. So there are a lot of complicated things that go into it and I want to say that with this, that there's a lot of analysis. The important thing is to do the analysis and have it be data-based, but move forward without getting paralyzed. And I think that's the goal of what we're working on right now. So we'll have more to say about that as we move forward and as we go into kind of term sheet and greater analysis, but that's the kind of thing that we're thinking about at this point.
I just want to add, because obviously the plan, I think, as I said before, there's some details obviously that are not fleshed out, and I think the administration is still fleshing those out. But I just want you to know, in the coming months, we're going to be doing a hearing on the plan, and I'm very excited to be asking that question and some more very specific questions, and hopefully we can get some more answers for that. But I think the administration, I think the plan, as I said, was a great framework, but it was just that. And so we have to now figure out how it's going to be applied neighborhood to neighborhood.
So I think we have time for one more question, quick question. Oh, so all the way in the back, the gentleman all the way in the back. So you have to talk really loudly.
I'm just wondering if there's any timeline or process yet defined for getting out to the community to define the corridors for higher density and/or phasing in permanent, phasing in mandatory inclusionary.
So we commit in the plan to roll out quite a number of these initiatives, this year in what's left of this year. But let me assure you that we are working on all of those things, not as we speak because we're here, but back at the farm, back at the ranch, we are working on all of those things, and we expect to be announcing some of. First of all, right now we're already underway on the kind of study trying to look at the underpinnings of what we should be trying to accomplish in our inclusionary zoning policies. So that study is already underway, and we expect that will be rolled out and become public really in a couple of months. At the same time, we're working across agencies to identify neighborhoods within the city's 5 boroughs that we think have a lot of potential for additional housing. We're also looking at neighborhoods that are already have been upzoned in prior administrations or have capacity that's not right now being used, and trying to understand what would be needed. Is it an infrastructure investment? Is it some regulatory barrier? Why isn't that neighborhood taking off in the way that the zoning allows it to take off? So those processes are all underway. We will go public with those neighborhoods once we feel that we've done all of our homework and really are comfortable starting to have those conversations. So remember, the plan was announced a month ago. It is just a framework. It is going to take a long time to flesh out all the details, and frankly, it will be iterative, and it will be rolling out not just over the next couple of months, but really over the next 10 years as we learn, as we adjust, as new ideas come in. It's a living document. It's not, a one-shot deal.
So it sounds like we should all plan to be here in June 2015 to talk about the 1-year anniversary, and we'll continue to.
Can I say-
Obviously, this plan is iterative.
One
Yeah.
last thing, because
One
I do
last
know,
thing.
I know that people are less concerned about the brave new progressive world, and are more concerned because they don't fully understand what the rules are. And so it's important to me to make sure we get the rules out that are clear as possible, so that people will feel a little more at ease and understand what the new world is. So I think that's
Thank you. So please join me in thanking Commissioner Bean and this terrific panel.